We got some brand new research. You know I love me some research.
Mm-hmm.
And I know people get all wound up about research. But I think it's a helpful window, as long as you don't put too much stock in it.
Right.
It's a helpful window into people's lives on various issues. And this one happens to be spiritual. I didn't realize this, but George Barna, he's like the famous Christian researcher.
Right.
Barna Research. He now works for the Cultural Research Center at Arizona Christian University. He doesn't work at Barna anymore. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah, that's run by a different guy, David Kinnaman. So anyway, now that we've got that lesson finished, they did a brand new installment in their series on American worldview. So they grabbed about 2,100 adults in January and asked them some spiritual questions. Now, sometimes when these things are written out, they're a little confusing. So I'm going to help you with some information before we look at the results of this, okay? They would really categorize people in about 4 categories. There'd be the, non-Christians, self-identified Christians, theologically identified born-again Christians, and integrated disciples.
Okay.
That's a lot, but it's in gradations.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they don't do a super great job deciding like how they put these categories, like explaining how these categories are made. But I think we can all figure out self-identified Christians. People go, "You Christian?" "Oh, yeah, I'm a Christian." Okay, and that's the lowest level of entry point into someone saying they're a Christian. Then we have theologically identified born-again Christians and integrated disciples. The most the depth at which someone would answer all the right theological questions and understand everything to be considered a Christian would be the integrated disciple. They really got their things ironed out. Is this helpful in some way, the categories where we look at the numbers? You're showing it's like a ladder. It's a scaffold.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now let's look at a couple of questions from the survey, and we're going to zero in on the Trinity. Okay, so first of all, people were asked, do you believe God exists and affects people's lives? If you take the entire sample group, 40% of respondents believe God exists. So this includes the atheists and such.
Mm-hmm.
Of 2,100 Americans, only 40% think God exists in this group.
That's disappointing.
I'm surprised it's that high.
But now let's break it down, okay? The integrated disciples, the highest category of belief, 100% of them are like, yep, God exists. Whew, good.
Yeah.
I would hope they would be high.
Theologically identified born-again Christians, 60%.
What?
Huh?
I know. That's what I read. The self-identified, yeah, I'm a Christian, 53%.
Maybe it's just accounting for that people have doubts. I want to know exactly how they asked the question.
Or maybe that's my parents were Christians, ergo I'm a Christian.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is why I think, oftentimes surveys talk about Christians or evangelicals. The level at which we ought to trust that clearly is not a very high level of trust.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so curious what these people think of Christians if they're calling themselves a Christian.
It's like,
I'm an
Jesus is
elephant,
cool.
then.
I like Jesus. He's cool.
Like they believe in some biblical principles, something like that.
So how about this one? The same group of 2,100 adults were asked, do you believe in the existence of Jesus Christ? Who, by the way, was a historical figure.
Yeah, sure.
Verifiably so.
I mean, every world history textbook I ever taught out of, and every college course that dealt with this era of history includes discussions of the person of Jesus who literally existed.
Right.
It is an indisputable fact that he did. And yet in this survey, if you look at 2,100 adults, 59% said, yes, I believe Jesus existed. 59%.
Shocking.
No, again, this is not necessarily just Christian people are saying this. Hopefully, I don't know how you call yourself a Christian, don't believe he existed. But we have a significant number of human beings alive who don't realize that Jesus was a real person. If you ask them, did Shakespeare exist? I bet you get 100%. You ask them, Julius Caesar. Sure, yeah, like that. What in the world?
Socrates, Plato. Oh, yeah, sure. But not Jesus. There's at least as much evidence of his existence as any of those others.
But now it's about to get real theological, so we need Lauren's theology hat. Okay, you ready, Lauren? Moody Bible Institute graduate. So the question about the Trinity. So they asked, do you believe in the Trinity that the God of the Bible is, quote, three distinct but inseparable and equal persons in one infinite being? The persons in the Trinity are being God, the Father, Jesus Christ, and the Holy Spirit. All of that was in the question. How do you feel about that?
Good.
That's pretty theological. Three distinct but inseparable and equal persons in one infinite being, that being God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. Okay? Among integrated disciples, their highest level of Christian, 62% said yes.
Wow.
What your head is about to explode.
You can't call yourself a Christian and not believe in the Trinity.
But we have 62% in this survey of the most qualified Christian, the person that would be most identified as an act. Okay, you're a Christian. Only 62% are buying into the Trinity.
It's a core doctrine of the Christian faith that God is a triune being.
Just for funsies here, only 24% of theologically identified born-again Christians thought it. 6% of self-identified Christians.
So it drops very dramatically as we go down.
And the overall group, sample group, only 11% said yes. So what do you make of that, Lauren, as a theology nerd?
I mean, it's not surprising that people don't. A sample group would be so low because it's a very hard concept even for people who do believe in a Trinity to understand and grasp. That it's one being that's in three persons, that they're all God, but they're also all their own being. It's a hard concept to understand. It's a hard concept to understand that Jesus is human and God. It's hard to understand that God, through the Holy Spirit, is a spirit, but also is like divine in this other being. It's hard. It's hard
to understand.
Yes, it's hard to understand. And so I'm not surprised that at the large sample group, people don't believe that that's true because it's hard to understand. And if you can't make something understandable, then why would you believe it?
Would you agree, though, it's a problem if you are categorizing this intensely, various types of people?
Yes, that's a problem.
That you've got only 62% of the highest level of Christian they're measuring saying they believe in the Trinity.
Yes, that's a problem.
Yes.
So the question becomes, why is this the case? We're talking about new research out of George Barna's Cultural Research Center at Arizona Christian University, a group of 2,100 adults. If you're just tuning in, they made a real kind of complicated way to break down the various levels at which someone is considered a Christian. There's like 3 levels: self-identified, they have another one, and then integrated disciple, okay? The problem is even among the highest level of qualification to be called a Christian in their survey. Lauren doesn't like the way I phrase that.
No, I'm laughing at myself.
Oh, okay.
A joke I made in my head by myself.
I do that all the time. It's great. So 62%, only 62% of integrated disciples believe in the Trinity.
It's bad.
So why
do
is
they not
this?
believe in the Trinity, or they don't believe that God is triune?
They were asked, I have quotes, do you believe in the Trinity, that the God of the Bible is 3 distinct but inseparable and equal persons in one infinite being?
So they believe that there's a God, but not necessarily that he's triune in nature.
I guess, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
They don't understand the basic, again, nobody really understands the Trinity.
You can't, yeah.
But the principle that it's one but 3 parts, 3 persons,
Not
Father,
parts.
Son, Holy Spirit.
Not parts.
Persons. Lauren, Father, Son, Holy Spirit.
No, that's a big deal. You can't say it's parts.
But what I'm saying is, even theology nerds like you, I can look at this and go, yeah, I believe in that.
Yeah.
But only 62% of people in the survey that are
scary.
I think what's tripping people up is, one, it is a very, very hard concept that completely transcends our ability to understand as humans. And I think the other part, too, is that pastors, I feel, don't do a great job of focusing on these harder theological and biblical truths to make sure their congregants understand.
That's one of George Barna's very points.
Yeah.
He said many Christian churches are focused on delivering multi-part series that are not effectively developing or bolstering an integrated biblical worldview that congregants can rely upon to counteract popular secular takes on reality. Like, he's somewhat kind of going, pastors, your sermons are cute. They're full of points and alliterations, but you're not teaching basic theology.
Mm-hmm. You can't just assume that everybody it comes from a background where they know this. I mean, there's plenty of concepts that I wasn't familiar with at all until I got well into adulthood because it just never, my dad did a great job of laying a biblical foundation. There are certain things that just never occurred to him to make sure I understood.
Yeah, I would say. Do you buy into that reason, Lauren?
Yeah, I think that you can't assume that everyone in your congregation just knows that we all here are believing that God is triune.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I thought when I was teaching high school, I taught world religions as part of geography. And I would teach the major ones. I would teach Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism. I think I also did Taoism at one point. And I kind of assumed I could just skip over the Christian stuff because it was a bunch of suburban kids. Totally wrong. Like I actually did the diagram up in front of, you can draw like two cliffs.
Yeah.
And Jesus, the
cross is like the bridge.
And I did that illustration the way it's supposed to be done. Two girls in the back raise their hand. Doesn't sound anything like what our pastor says. And I was like, what? So another reason George Barna says this has happened, he said, quote, "It could be argued that the primary theologians influencing the spiritual views of Americans these days are figures such as Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan, Russell Brand, Jordan Peterson, Megyn Kelly, and Bill Maher."
Oh, those famed theologians.
He said all influential podcasters and not religious figures.
Who's getting their religious and biblical information from those guys?
All of them talk explicitly about faith.
All of them on that list.
And I've heard some of them talk about faith, and I have many questions.
Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan, Russell Brand, Jordan Peterson, Megyn Kelly, and Bill Maher. All of them talk about religion regularly.
Wow. I don't know a couple of them, and I would not think of Tucker Carlson or Joe Rogan or Megyn Kelly. They have distinct places, but theology is not anything I would associate with them. I wouldn't say they're not Christians. I just wouldn't go to them for my theological training.
And I would argue some of them aren't, just based on what I've heard them say.
Well, and I don't think Barna is saying that people are going to them for their theological training, but it's a consequence of consuming mass quantities of their content.
Yeah.
Is that you absorb in bad theology.
Right.
If the primary spokespeople spiritually into your life are not actual spiritual people.
That's a problem.
I think he's right.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of us soaking in our worldview from commentators.
What you consume over time is what you start believing. And so if that's all you're listening to and they're talking about faith or spirituality in whatever ways they talk about it and it's improper, you're going to start believing that because it's all you're consuming.
Something we got to be cautious of. And I don't know. I mean, I think we can all do our own part to make sure that even though it's not necessarily fun to study the Trinity, we can't take it too lightly either. We have to be able to articulate at least a fundamental principle of it to be able to claim Christ. Yeah, Lauren?
I mean, I think it's very fun. So I don't know what you're talking about.
You and Eddie are kind of like, oh, honey, I missed you. By the way, transubstantiation or consubstantiation? Oh, honey, I love when you talk to me like that. That's Eddie and Lauren right there.